Welcome to the Hockey Podcast. I am Luke Lipinski.
And I am Doug Cannon.
On this week's show, we break down the conference finals. I blame Toronto for things, try to figure out what the Rangers are doing, and look at the Canucks' odd plan of employing two number one goalies without a coach.
We will also look at the possibility of Wayne Gretzky or Mark Messier becoming the bench boss in New York, the upcoming NHL Competition Committee meeting, and the world dominance of Sweden.
All that and more. Let's drop the puck on episode 9. All right, Doug, conference finals are here. Let's start in the Western Conference, as we always do. The Blackhawks taking on the LA Kings. As we record this right now, on Sunday, Chicago's up 1-0. There will be game 2 tonight, so chances are, as you hear this, you'll know what happened in that one. So if Chicago wins that game, they'll be up 2-0, and what I'm about to say may not seem like much of a bold prediction. Maybe it isn't anyway, but I don't know. I told you this before the series started. Coming into this series, no disrespect to LA or anything they've accomplished. They obviously won the Stanley Cup last year. They've looked very good in the playoffs this year. I don't see any way they win this series against Chicago. And I don't think it's going to be like a 4-game sweep. It could go 7 games, but you can't beat Chicago playing 1-0 and 2-1 hockey.
I don't think it's a lock.
Okay.
I don't think it's a lock because of one guy and one guy only, or maybe two guys, but one guy, definitely Jonathan Quick. Okay, Chicago won the first one. It was a low-scoring game.
But that's what LA does. All their games are 2-1. Chicago's going to score 2 goals in a game 4 times this series. That's just going to happen.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because the Kings right now, their road record is 1-6.
Oh, it's terrible.
And each road loss has been a 2-1 loss.
Yeah. You could pick the Game 7 score against San Jose you knew was going to be 2-1.
12 of their 14 games have been decided by 1 goal. So almost 86% of their games are being decided by 1 goal, which means, I guess you're guessing, but for me it means that they have to fight tooth and nail just to stay in, and the guy that's keeping them in is the goalie, and you're not going to be very successful if that's the guy that keeps you in every single game.
You have to be able to get some offense. Obviously, look, the comparison between LA and New York doesn't work, except that the Rangers have an excellent goalie, and at a certain point, you need more than that. Now, LA has more than that, but they're also playing the Chicago Blackhawks now, and Chicago, look, Jonathan Quick, if he goes through this whole series and gives up 2 goals every game against the Blackhawks, that's a great series, but they won't win. So that's not going to work.
Well, and Justin Williams right now is their hottest player. He's scored 3 points in their last 2 games. In fact, he's the only guy that has scored in their last 2 games. That's a problem. You got Brown and Penner and Kopitar, and these guys aren't producing. That's a problem. It almost sounds like the Ranger program, right? Yeah. We had Nash not scoring. We had Brad Richards not scoring. Now, Sutter's got his guys, and he's got that same problem that Tortorella had.
I just think over the course of 7 games, and again, it maybe a lock is not the best way to put it, but I think over the course of 7 games, for a lot of reasons, Chicago has home ice advantage, and LA just doesn't win on the road. That's going to come back to haunt you at some point. If it's going to do it, it's going to come back to haunt you against a team like Chicago that had a great season. They have a great team. Chicago's going to find ways to score. They have enough different players. Kane and Taves haven't even really gotten going yet. And look, if Chicago ever scores 3 goals in a game in this series, that game's pretty much won. Over the course of 7 games, I just feel like they're going to win the series. Again, not a knock on LA. I think these are definitely the 4 best teams in the NHL this year, which is rare that we see them right here at this point. And this is the final, whether you like Chicago or the Kings on a personal level, this is probably the best final to see. But I just think all of the little matchups, all the little intangibles favor Chicago.
Well, I made a really stupid, creative Dougie stat, okay?
Okay. So like a Corsi stat?
Yeah.
A Dougie stat?
I did a Dougie stat.
Okay.
So I looked at the number 1 line of each team left in the playoffs.
Okay.
So I looked at Chicago's first line. Over the playoffs, they've generated 17 points.
All right.
I looked at the first line of the Kings. Over the playoffs, those 3 guys have generated 18 points. That's pretty even.
Very even.
Very even. Crawford is sitting with a 1.65 goals against average. Quick is sitting with a 1.54, and they're both save percentage 947 versus 939.
So comparable numbers-wise.
The numbers are like right there.
But we know better.
But we look at – I'm going to go. We look at the Kings' number 1 line. Brown, Kopitar, Williams. Williams is the only one producing.
That has to change.
You got Taves, Kane, and Saad on the other side of the ledger. And right now you got 2/3 of that line producing.
And Chicago has secondary scoring. They have Patrick Sharp, who's not a secondary scorer, I guess. They have Marian Hossa, but then they've got Brian Bickle, who scores every game now too.
Right.
You look at the NHL as a whole, and Jonathan Quick is definitely one of the best 3 goalies. He might be the best. I think Tuukka Rask is right up there with him. And LA is so good at playing this sort of grind it out. Every game is close. Every series seems to go 6-7 games now. But they play kind of what the Rangers were doing, except they play it to perfection, and the Rangers just stumble around and don't know what they're doing. So LA is in every series. But, boy, look how they got here.
But I'm going to twist you just a little bit.
Okay.
You look at the numbers we just discussed, and you just mentioned Quick. But the problem is Crawford's just as good as Quick.
But he hasn't faced those shots. The Quick has.
But he's guys in front of him producing. Quick doesn't have guys in front of him producing. So I go back to what I said earlier in the segment. Quick can stop the best shot and stand on his head and get his toe in the air and deflect the puck and stuff. It doesn't matter because you've got nobody in front of you putting the puck in the net on the other end. It doesn't matter how many saves you make. You can make 80, and you're not going to win.
And I know that LA has beaten 2 good teams to get here. I mean, came back from down 2-0 against St. Louis. They're never out of a series because of Quick. Knocked off a San Jose team that I thought was very impressive, but neither one of those teams is Chicago. And again, coming into this series, LA could have been out if Joe Pavelski could lift that puck. Mm-hmm. He's not going to sleep all summer.
No.
Because that was, I know that, heat of the moment, you got guys bearing down on you, but the puck was in a good position for him to lift it too. And who knows what happens there. Chicago comes in on a 3-game winning streak after knocking off their rivals from Detroit. I mean, Detroit set them up real nicely to maybe win the Stanley Cup with the way Chicago is going now. So they have momentum. It's going to be a great series, and I think it'll go 6-7 games. It may go 7 games, but I just think at the end, that 7th game is in Chicago, and LA is so unbeatable at home, but so very beatable on the road that what are you going to do?
I'm going to leave you with this. You just said it. Game 7's in Chicago. We just saw what happens when Game 7 is in Chicago.
Yeah. And we've seen what happens when LA is playing away from LA, which is so weird because that wasn't the case last year.
Exactly. It was the opposite.
But nobody, it seems like, is picking Chicago, which is so weird to me other than you and me. And it's not disrespect to LA to say they're one of the 4 best teams in the NHL.
Right.
I just don't think they're the best.
No, I think Chicago has the edge in this series. Absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
So over to the East, Pittsburgh, Boston.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
It's only one game. I know it's only one game.
Boston's a good hockey team. They're a good team. I told you before we went on the air, though, from a Penguins perspective, the first 40 minutes of that game, I thought I don't want to say dominated, but really controlled the game. It was just shot after shot. Malkin played one of the best games I've ever seen him play, but has nothing to show for it. And so now it's almost the equivalent of you have to beat Boston 5 out of 7 games. That's not great.
No. And shot after shot after shot doesn't help you when 6 of them are off the post.
Yeah, that's the one thing that really worries me here is it would worry me with any team. Pittsburgh is built on offense. Their offense is so good that they generally can get by on that, and that's fine. Anytime you get shut out, even if it's in the regular season, that's how losing streaks start.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of surprised me all year that Pittsburgh handled the Bruins in the regular season the way they did, because how can you not respect the Bruins?
But you and I said last week that doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
It's the playoffs. I'm sorry. Sure, swept them 3-0 in the regular season.
It means nothing.
It means nothing.
Especially
Absolutely.
now that they lost home ice.
And I always find it funny that people like us will look at a stat like that. Well, I manhandled them in the regular season.
I like that stat better, though, than Pittsburgh beat Boston the last time they played in the playoffs in 1992. Does not matter at all.
No, it doesn't.
But this, you start off getting shut out. That's just a bad start. I would have felt much better about Pittsburgh's chances if it was 2-1 Boston last night, and that's how they won.
But I think what you saw happen in Game 1 is what we discussed last week, is that you've got a high-octane team. You got a big physical team. And Boston used it. Boston used their size, their physicality, and they slowed the Penguins down. And the Penguins need that run and gun for lack of a better term. I know it's kind of an NBA thing, but that free-flowing, just skate, go, 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 go. And that's how Pittsburgh plays, and that's how they defeat teams, because they're always putting that pressure. I mean, you've got the other team on their heels because they're just coming at you in waves. If they have to go 200 feet, pick up the puck, they're coming. That breakout's 2 passes, it's out, and you're back in the other zone. And it's just that constant flow that wasn't there.
Yeah, and there were a couple patches in the second period where you could tell they were starting to rock things and get it to go that way, but then they would hit the post. And Tuukka Rask is so good, and he's probably another one of the top 3 goalies in the league. If you're going to hit the post 6 times against him, you're not going to win. And
funny thing is, he's got the worst numbers out of the 4 teams left. Out
of
the 4 goalies playing, Tuukka Rask has the worst numbers.
But he could take over a game, and I think of the 4, he's probably the second best left. So, and he could also very capable of just melting down and breaking a stick over the wall, as we've seen him do in the past. And I don't know. It was one of those weird situations for the Penguins. And now I don't know what the Bruins – I don't know if the game plan here for the Bruins is to do more of what Brad Marchand does and anger the Penguins, because it seems to make the rest of the Penguins skate harder but produce nothing, and then it makes Malkin better.
Okay, well, let's take a Pittsburgh view at Boston. Okay?
Right.
Much like L.A., Boston has one guy scoring right now.
Yeah, but I think Boston can score with Pittsburgh. Not 6-5 games, but they can win 3-2 games.
Yeah, but they need more than one guy. I mean, Krejci's like the number 1 playoff scorer right now in the league, and he's the number 1 scorer for his team. He had 2 out of 3 goals in game 1. He's not slowing down.
No.
But can one guy just do it all for you?
I don't think it'll just be him. I mean, as much as I don't like Marchand, I don't like the way he plays. Nobody who's not a Bruins fan respects the way that guy plays. But he's a good player when he just focuses on playing.
I go back to the quarterfinals, and I go against Boston-Toronto. Bergeron really didn't show up until late in the series.
Well, he showed up in Game 1 because he hit James Neal from behind headfirst into the wall. By the way, thank you, Toronto, for letting Boston. Boston could win the Stanley Cup now, and you guys could have just held on for another minute and a half.
But, I mean, you look at their number 1 line, none of them are scoring right now.
No, but they're still winning.
It just.
And like you just said, it's not just Rask that's winning them games.
No, there's other guys, and that other one of the main guys is Krejci. He amazes me right now that he's the big boss right now on that team.
Bergeron's been really good too. We haven't seen a whole lot out of Sagan, which is kind of scary because if he gets going, then that's more offense. I don't know. This is to me, this is the better series of these 2 conference finals.
Well, here's a note for you out of the 2 series. Okay.
Okay.
The Pittsburgh-Boston series. Boston had 7 penalties. Pittsburgh had 7 penalties. That's 14 minutes
each. Well, and a lot of those were fighting.
But think about it, though. Just look at the total minutes. That's almost a period of hockey. A third of the game, you're either shorthanded, and there is no rhythm when that happens. 0 rhythm. And so you can't have strong 5-on-5 play going back and forth. As a coach, putting a guy in there, taking him out, sending a guy in, sending in. The other series, LA had only 4 penalties. Chicago only had 2.
Well, and discipline's going to win this time of year.
Absolutely. If you're only two penalties a game, that means the majority of your game is 5-on-5, or you're the one that's got the extra player. You can't have 7 penalties in a game.
No, and that's why this series is so intriguing, because if Boston's plan is to continuously put the Penguins on the power play, Pittsburgh's going to start scoring, and then once they start scoring, they might not stop. But at the same time, right now, Pittsburgh's taking penalties too. It's a disjointed game. It's not 5-on-5 with a flow, which would favor the Penguins, because if this game, like you said, goes back and forth, the Bruins aren't as talented as Pittsburgh, but they're an excellent team, and that's where there's problems. And we didn't even get into the Marchand hit and the Matt Cook hit. I mean, this series is already off to such a physical start. I don't know what your thoughts were on those. I thought they were both equally bad, but different.
I look at hits in the playoffs just a little bit differently than most people, because I'll go back to the 3-0 in the regular season. It doesn't mean anything anymore. It doesn't mean anything more because we're in the playoffs, and the intensity and the emotion and all of that is there, okay? The hits are going to be bigger and harder, and they're going to look uglier, but
Well, for it to be those two guys is an interesting way for the series to start.
Well, that's the other thing, right? Well, it's Rafi Torres, so it's got to be a bad hit. It's Matt Cook, it's got to be a bad hit.
Yeah. Well, that was my contention. If you switch those guys, if Marchand makes Cook's hit and Cook makes Marchand's hit, people are just flying off the handle at Cook in that case. So no matter what, Cook can't win, but he's done this to himself too.
Well, that's true, but I mean, I try not to. If it's a clean hit, it's a clean hit. His pass doesn't matter. If it's a dirty hit, it's a dirty hit.
I agree.
I just think the intensity is so strong in the playoffs that things are kind of always going to be pushing the envelope.
Yeah, and I mean, there was people tweeting out the fact that McQuaid could see Cook coming and turn. I mean, whatever it is, like you said, there's just going to be hits. Now the question is, can Pittsburgh get themselves in a situation where they're going to score dirty goals, or are they going to be just so tied into their every goal has to be pretty, and that's how we're going to score? Because if that's the case, they're not going to beat Boston. They're going to have to get ugly goals.
They've scored way too many points so far in the series for them not to score. I don't know what happened in Game 1. I can't put my finger on what that X factor is, why they couldn't get it to come together. But they are way, 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 way too talented to even warrant a shutout. So I don't know if it's a head game that they're dealing with. A lot of chirping was going on the ice. You don't know what's being said on the ice.
And that's Boston's game.
That's Boston's game. So this coach pull them aside and say, look, we got to play our game. I don't know, but they got to score, or it's going to be short.
Well, that's the best thing about the playoffs. It's 7 games. It's just like one big story that unfolds. So now does Pittsburgh respond, or does Boston just keep rolling?
The wisdom of the afternoon. If Toronto can push Boston to 7, Pittsburgh can push Boston to 7.
How about if Toronto just beats Boston and Pittsburgh can just walk to the finals?
You're listening to The Hockey Podcast. Feel free to email comments or questions to the show at our email address, thehockeypodcast@gmail.com.
All right, back now looking over to the coaching carousel in the National Hockey League.
Was ist das, Luke? You said you were going to open in German, and there's no German there.
So we
Was
weren't
ist
going to
das?
open in German.
Okay.
But this is my interpretation of the German language. We're going
Okay.
to mix it up here a little bit on the Hockey Podcast and do this.
Sehr gut, ja.
That's not any language.
Yes, it is. That's
Really?
German.
I don't even know
Sehr
if
gut.
you may have just sworn at me. I don't even know.
No, that just means very good.
Well, speaking of swearing at people, John Tortorella fired earlier this week.
That is called a segue.
See that?
There you go.
I'm just here
ding,
for the
ding,
segues.
ding, 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 ding.
I'm out, actually. Now
Okay.
you can do the rest of the show by yourself. Tortorella gets fired earlier this week. We wrapped up, I think the last words of our show last week were you saying he's out. Mm-hmm. We've been talking about this a lot, actually. What episode is this, 9?
It's episode 9, yeah.
I feel like we've been talking about Tortorella for about 5 or 6 of those weeks, and we said a month, 2 months ago that the reason you could justify firing him, if you're the Rangers, is the fact that his coaching style kind of has a shelf life. And you can only yell at your players for so long. It's very effective for a while. It's not like those guys necessarily hate him, or maybe they do, I don't know. But it's not necessarily, at least in a vacuum, that they hate him. It's just that style only works for so long. And then you're not having success, and there's just a guy yelling at you who's angry and Italian and from Boston. And sometimes you can't get that extra jump out of it. We saw that this year.
Well, let me give you a good analogy to that.
Okay.
I coach youth hockey. I've said it many times on this show. I'm also a father of a fairly large brood.
Yes, it's like 10 kids running around.
I don't care who you are. At one point, when somebody is berating you or yelling at you, you tune out. And children do it, so you got to find a more creative way to communicate them. I've seen it in youth hockey where a coach is just ba 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 ba, and a 14-year-old boy is just like, don't, not listening anymore.
At a certain point.
And you're not going to get anything out of that kid.
Just like Marion Gaborik.
If you can't communicate, yelling at somebody is not communicating. There are points where you have to emphasize and you get a little flamboyant, and I get that. But you're right, cussing and yelling, and I think that's exactly what happened. That team shut down on him.
Well, I think every coach in the NHL probably does that at one time or another.
Sure, it's an exclamation point.
But it's almost like a movie that you watch, and there's 2 or 3 bad words in the whole movie, but when they're said, they have so much more meaning because you're like, whoa, I didn't expect that character to say that. Like, he's obviously upset or is obviously passionate about this. with a guy like Tortorella, and I think the guy's a good coach, and I think he's going to land somewhere else, and at least for a couple of years. But at a certain point, like you said, it's all the same. If you're the Rangers, you heard it in their exit interviews. I mean, even Henrik Lundqvist was like, I don't know if I'm coming back or not when my contract's up. These guys went to the conference finals last year. When that's your coaching style, you have to keep doing better each year. This year was not, I mean, they made the second round of the playoffs. They're one of the 8 final teams they fired their coach, and yet they all looked at it as a step back because it's got to be so exhausting to be yelled at by your coach like that. You at least want the reward of winning the Stanley Cup.
We said it many episodes ago. We were questioning if the Rangers were even going to make it to the playoffs. That's where it all started. A lot of it has to do with the coach. A lot of it has to do with team chemistry. I'll always harp on that. I think the team chemistry was messed up.
Yeah, this isn't all Tortorella's fault.
No, I think team chemistry was messed up, and then his coaching style on top of that just didn't help it. He got him pretty far, just not enough in the tank to push it over. So Tortorella is available as a head coach in the NHL. That's one.
And for the right team, I think he's a great pickup. If you got a young team of guys that needs whipped into shape, there's your guy.
Edmonton.
Yeah, if they didn't just hire a coach last year, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Dave Tippett's available. Well,
no,
not qualified.
He's not.
No, he's not. Dave Tippett's
teams
contract,
wish he was available.
Teams wish that Dave Tippett's available. They're talking about Dave Tippett because at the end of this month, his contract is over with the Phoenix Coyotes. Hopefully, the Coyotes are able to retain him, and he comes off the list. Alain Vigneault is available. Lindy Ruff is available.
And Vigneault and Ruff's names are just brought up with every team that needs a coach now.
And the $64,000 question, the Dallas Stars coach is available. Name him.
Glenn Gulutzan.
Yeah!
Haven't heard his name come up. Which, look, I don't want to transition away from the Rangers too much yet, but we have to jump to Dallas. How many times are they going to start over?
Well, wait.
You brought up Glenn Gulutzan, and it just gets me so passionate.
I'm just naming coaches. Finish your Ranger thought, and then we'll go into Dallas.
Tortorella, that team got to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. They went to Game 6. They lost in overtime. It's insane to me that the coach is fired a year later unless he has done something wrong off the ice, which he hasn't. So it is insane to me. It's a bit of a jump by the Rangers here because now who are you bringing in? Because the names you just listed off to me, in my mind, I don't know that any of those guys are any better than John Tortorella, but with the Rangers, you have Henrik Lundqvist, who's an unrestricted free agent after next year. You have a lot of question marks on the roster after next year. So if you're the Rangers and you're getting rid of a guy that just won 3 playoff series in 2 years, you expect to win now. So then you really can't go to the AHL, can you, and expect to win right away with a coach that hasn't coached at the NHL level before?
But who says they're going to do that?
And that's what I'm saying. If they're not going to do that, then you're just recycling guys that haven't worked elsewhere.
Yeah, but I look at Ron Wilson when he was with San Jose. I mean, how many years, and I've said it before on the show, Alain Vigneault, his numbers are awesome, but once he gets to the playoffs, he goes nowhere. I mean, he went as deep as the finals, but didn't win. Wilson in San Jose, when he was he got there, but he just never got over the hump.
Well, that's San Jose. It's just the Sharks.
But, I mean, for how many years are you going to do that? That's another reason why Tortorella is gone, is that he didn't finish.
Yeah, but everybody doesn't win the Stanley Cup every year.
It's New York. Bar is a little bit higher. I'm sorry.
It is a higher, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. They're not going to bring in Mark Messier as the head coach. He's not going to win right away.
Well, they might bring in Wayne Gretzky.
I would rather have Gretzky than Messier. He's coached at the NHL level before.
I don't know. That's a tricky one. And I feel sorry for the guy that does come in because it is New York,
and he has to.
You have to perform.
Winning a playoff series was a disappointment this year. So if you're the new coach, you now need to get to the conference finals. And Mark Messier could be a great coach. I mean, that guy is an amazing leader. But I don't care who you are. You're not going to come in and you're not going to win 2 playoff series in your first year as a coach ever. I guess you could. Dan Bilesma did, Guy Boucher did, but it's not frequent. It's not often.
There's one coach I think that could make New York win.
Wait, let me see if I can guess. Scotty Bowman.
Nope.
Okay. Toe Blake.
He's under contract, though.
Oh, well, then you can't have him.
But his contract's over June 30th.
Yeah, but you're not. No, he's not. No.
He's one guy that could turn that team around.
He could turn any team around, but he's not leaving because he's already turned a specific team around where he's going to stay.
The guy that goes to New York has got to be able to get that room to buy into some kind of system.
Yeah.
And once you get them bought into a system, then I can see the talent on that team performing.
The other thing with the Rangers, too, and we talk so much about Tortorella's coaching style and just his general demeanor, but it's also got to wear on you when you have built your team to win every game 1-0 or 2-1. They lean so heavily on Lundqvist. There are other teams in the league that lean on defense, and you're pointing to the whiteboard.
I'm pointing to the whiteboard, and I'm pointing to L.A. We talked about it in the opening segment. I don't care how great your goalie is. He can stop 100 shots. If he lets in 10 goals and you score 1, you're always going to lose.
Yeah, and look, I mean, L.A. is that way. I mean, there are other teams. The Coyotes had success with this last year that built around defense and had strong goaltending, but they had a system in place where everything was working. The Rangers didn't seem to have anything working. So then it was just, hopefully Lundqvist gets us a shutout and we win. Whereas the Kings obviously were doing better than that last year because they won the Cup. I mean, they get offense and they have a system and they play great defense in front of them. The Rangers, it seemed like by the end their plan was hopefully Lundqvist can get 4 shutouts in this series and we'll go to Game 7. And that just, it doesn't work. And more than that, it just wears on you.
Well, at least they had a plan. Does Dallas have a plan?
I don't know what Dallas is doing. I mean, I feel like
whether their plan was right or wrong or different, what is Dallas's plan?
I feel like a year from now we're going to be having the same conversation because that team just needs stable direction.
Okay, here's something for you. Watch this.
Okay, I'm watching.
Timeline over the last month.
I'm going to
watch
this on the podcast.
Joe Nieuwendyk is released as GM. Jim Neal is hired as GM. They fired Glenn Gulletson and his assistant, Paul Girard. They just let the assistant GM, Frank Provenzano, go.
That's a good Italian name.
They just hired Scott White, the GM of the AHL Texas Stars, as the new assistant GM and the GM of the Texas Stars.
Okay.
They also there was something else they did.
This isn't the first time they've done this, though.
And Les Jackson and Mark Janko will all be within hockey administration. So I mean, they've really shook up that front office.
But they just did this.
I know.
Gulletson just started coaching in 2011. That was last year, wasn't it? Last season.
So what are we doing? What are we doing, Dallas?
They had Mark Crawford for 2 years before that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, granted, they had a great coach before that and felt the need to get rid of him because he missed the playoffs once in 7 years. But whatever. And those guys that made that decision are basically gone. So I mean, I think they realized that was a mistake. But now you've gone through 2 coaches in the span of basically 4 seasons. Yeah, two coaches since you got rid of Dave Tippett, who took you to the playoffs 6 times in 7 years. Mm-hmm. And the only time you missed was because everybody on the roster was hurt. So now you've gone through 2 coaches, and you're going to bring in a third.
Well,
you traded James Neal to the Penguins and a defenseman for Alex Goligoski. Like, there's just been a lot of, it feels like almost panic moves. That team had a lot of talent.
Yeah. Also, I think you also have to look that there's been a lot of ownership stuff going on in the background.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a lot of things here that, most fans don't get to see. We just get to see what I just rattled off.
Yeah.
Because that's out in the public, right?
Because people like you are putting it out there.
There's a lot of stuff, though, that's going on behind the scenes that, affect some of these decisions. Get a new owner in. He has goals. He has expectations. And now you look at it and go, well, I don't know if the guys are going to meet the new owner's expectations, so let's get some guys in that will meet the new owner's expectations. So then you've got that, And one last thing I'm going to say here is, they're changing their uniform.
Yeah, well, change everything, I guess, right? Look, I get what you're saying. I mean, there's stuff behind the scenes, and that's why I'm not trying to point blame, but what I'm saying is they need stable direction because they've got talent on that roster. I mean, you got Louis Eriksson, you've got Jamie Benn. Yeah, James Neal's gone now, and he scores 40 goals a year, but they've drafted well. It just you need to pick a plan and stick with it if you're going to win. You can't change every year, every other year, and they are always in contention for a playoff spot, and then they fall off right at the end.
Well, I don't know who their new head coach is going to be.
Neither do they.
But I got a feeling with the ownership stuff finally settled, the changes being made, I think going down the road, I don't think you're going to see another 5 years. You're going to see any kind of changes.
Well, really quickly then on some of the names that we mentioned, Lindy Ruff and Alain Vigneault are coming up with the Rangers. Are coming up. Well, Vigneault's not coming up with Vancouver, but it seems like the same names are coming up with all these teams. But for Dallas, Willie Desjardins, the Texas Stars, the AHL affiliate of the Stars, he's their coach of the year, I believe, at the AHL level.
Yeah, he was the AHL coach of the year.
So he's being considered. And Dallas Eakins of the Toronto Marlies is being considered also by the Rangers, who, again, could be a great hire, except not for the Rangers because they need to win now, but also being considered by Dallas. And so I pose this question to you. If you're Willie Desjardins and your professional, like your NHL level team, passes on you for somebody else at the AHL level, and you just won coach of the year, what is your motivation?
Well, he's been around for a while, and you know what? You just got to ride it out.
For how long?
You just got to ride it out.
I mean, I will give Dallas this. Dallas Eakins' first name is the first name of their city, so maybe that gives them like some sort of reason they can just pass on their coach. But I don't think Dallas Eakins can go to the Dallas Stars.
Well, then they should hire Dallas Green of City and Color.
Dallas Drake?
Dally would be a good coach.
Of what? City and Color?
That's a band.
All right, I'll look them up. So anyway, Dallas, New York, both looking for coaches. Vancouver looking for a coach too. I like your point of how many times you're going to recycle coaches.
Right. I mean, to me, Willie he's in the organization. He deserves the shot. You gave the GM of the Stars a shot. Why not give the coach a shot?
There you go. And maybe they will. I mean, they are talking to him.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a done deal yet. I mean, if Eakins is being looked at by the Rangers and stuff, I don't see that either, but...
And then Vancouver, they're not going to have a coach, I guess. I don't know. I mean,
I haven't heard anything from that corner of the world.
2 goalies, no coach. It's a great system. You can't lose with that sort of strategy in place.
And you don't know who the number 1 goalie is.
No big deal. You're tuned into the Hockey Podcast. Follow us on Twitter @HockeyPodcast for even more hockey news.
#do it.
Last segment, news and notes. We'll keep this quick because we both want to go out and run around in the 110-degree weather here at Phoenix, Arizona, and see if we can possibly pass out from dizziness.
Yeah, if you haven't guessed, the show's being done in Phoenix.
Yeah, my laptop over here is melting as we speak. Quickly, AHL, they're heading towards the Calder Cup. Syracuse is already in. That is the affiliate of the Tampa Bay Lightning.
And who did they defeat, Luke?
I always hate saying this city's name. Scranton Wilkes-Barre Penguins. Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. Yes, thank you. The Penguins lost again on another level. I appreciate you pointing that out to me. So Syracuse is in the Calder Cup finals. They will take on either Grand Rapids or Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City, of course, the Oilers affiliate, because that's where all the Oilers were playing during the work stoppage, and then Grand Rapids, the Detroit affiliate, because the Red Wings need more help in the minor league system. They're just never good enough. Over to the NHL Draft Combine.
Yes, let's touch. I came across a really interesting note, and I shared it with you earlier, and I'm going to share it again. The Combine has 86 North American skaters, 7 North American goalies, 14 European skaters, and one goalie. One goalie.
There's got to be a lonely feeling.
Pretty big honor, though, if you're that one guy.
I guess that's true.
The thing I noticed, though, when I broke the skaters from Europe down by country, 7 of the 14 skaters are from Sweden.
Yeah, Sweden's taken over.
50% of the skaters are from one country.
They're taking over, and this is how I know. I watch hockey with some people that don't follow hockey as closely, and they're getting into it over the last, and certainly what the Coyotes did here last year, going to the Western Conference Finals helped. But just in general, I mean, the sport is, it's on a roll right now. And a lot of people are like, oh, where's that guy from? Every time it's a good player, they're from Sweden. If they're not from the U.S. and Canada, if it's clearly a foreign player and they're like, where's it's always Sweden. Look at the Nicholas Lidstrom. I know he's retired, but, Landeskog in Colorado, Ekman Larson in Phoenix, Zetterberg in Detroit, Lundqvist on the Rangers. It just always seems to be a Swedish player. They're always in the gold medal game. It feels like either at the Olympics, they were close last time, the World Juniors this year, they lost to the U.S., not Canada. Let me point that out since you pointed out the Penguins' minor league team just lost. But there's a lot of Swedish hockey players that are very good.
Yeah, my point is, and I don't disagree with any of that, my point is that you just named some really high-caliber hockey players but they're never talked about from where they come from.
Yeah.
You know, their country of origin is never discussed. Whereas if it's a North American skater, country of origin is always discussed.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So my point is that when we talk about hockey powers, the top three automatically are typically Russia, Canada, on an international level, Russia, Canada, U.S.
Sweden's right there.
But Sweden's starting to overcome. I mean, Russia's only got 4 guys.
You're right, though. You never, and that's probably because Sweden never talks about it. I mean, you never hear their players. You never hear Lundqvist
Well, that's
say,
because they're kinder and gentler than Canada.
That's true, and they're tiny. I mean, that's not that big of a country to
No,
have all that talent. But I think maybe just the Swedish culture is not to run around talking about how great they are. But you've got U.S., Canada bordering each other. So obviously there's going to be that sort of border war there. And Russia has always been such a power. But, yeah, Sweden's right there.
I was just looking at some news and notes on the Combine because the Combine ended yesterday. And I was like, holy cow, that's a big number. That's 50%. You know, whereas I go to the North American and I look at the top 15 teams on the North American side, you got 5 from the Q, 5 from the O, 5 from the W, pretty evenly distributed.
Yeah.
You know, but I just thought that that 50% just kind of really jumped out. And one last note on the Combine is that, you know, the top 3 draft picks or projected draft picks, Seth Jones, Nathan McKinnon, and Jonathan Drouin, all visited the Combine. I'm not so sure about McKinnon and Jones, but I know for a fact that Drouin didn't partake in any of the physical testing that went on at the Combine.
Which to me was instantly a red flag until I kind of learned the full story, and now it makes more sense.
Yeah, I read his quotes because he was interviewed about it, and he says, look, I just played in the Memorial Cup. I've played a lot of hockey over the last month. I have done no off-ice training. All I've been doing is playing the game of hockey.
Well, very well.
Extremely well, right. And he's like, look, I'm not going to put myself in a position. That's an assumption on my part. He didn't put himself, he and his agent discussed it. They didn't put him in a position where if he did the physical testing, he might not pass with like huge numbers or huge scores. So what he did instead said, look, I just finished playing a lot of hockey. If individual teams want me to do some kind of physical testing just for them, I'll do that, but I'm not going to do the whole big combine testing.
Which, you know, when you put it that way, probably is the right move. You see this in the NFL a lot, where if a quarterback knows he's going to be a top pick in the draft, he's going to be top 3 or top 4, he doesn't have to go out there and do all that stuff. He can schedule a pro day. In Drouin's case, yeah, he just played the Memorial Cup, and that wasn't like, oh, he just played 3 weeks ago. I mean, when this was happening, it was 3 days ago.
Right, exactly. So I think it was a good decision on the kid's part not to partake.
And for whatever reason, I mean, you look at his numbers, they're insane. I want to say it was 105 points this year. If not, it's right around there.
Yep.
And people can email in and tell me I'm wrong, except I'm not going to give out the email address, so they can't. But either way, he's right there, but he seems to be the third of the top 3. And heading into the draft, he might be the best of the top 3 5-10 years down the line, but for him, he could feasibly drop maybe to 4 or 5 or 6. It's little numbers right now because that's, I mean, you're so close to the top. He's not going to drop 10 spots, but you don't want to drop if you don't need to.
He's not going to drop. If he doesn't go third, he's not going to drop that much. I mean, it depends on what Colorado, Florida, and Tampa do. So where did Anaheim come from?
I don't know. Anaheim. Everybody in Anaheim was just like, finally.
They go, oh, we're third. No, sorry, it's Tampa's pick.
No, you're picking about 25 Anaheim.
So right now they got Jones, McKinnon, Drouin.
Well, I mean, the thing, if you look at that, it goes Colorado, Florida, Tampa is the order. Everybody needs a defenseman. There's like 3 teams in the NHL who don't need a defenseman, and all 3 of those teams need Seth Jones, so he's going to Colorado first.
Yeah, he's going first.
So
I agree.
Florida could use a scorer like McKinnon or playmaker.
Well, you're
like
not going to miss on either McKinnon or Drouin. They're both goal scorers.
But Tampa Bay doesn't need another one.
Not really.
I mean, I'm sure they'll take one because you take the best available player if you're picking that high. But
where do you pick need?
They need Seth Jones. I mean, they need defense.
Well, they're not going to get Seth Jones.
No.
That's clearly not going to happen.
But if I'm Drouin, I'm starting to think, is Tampa...
But you got Darnell Nurse, right?
Yeah.
You could take him.
I think he's like 6th or 7th.
Right.
His most rankings.
If you're happy with your scoring power.
So then, I mean, if you're Drouin, you could drop to 4 or 5 through no fault of your own.
Right. Or you got goaltenders, too. I mean...
Not many very high this year, though.
Yeah.
I looked when Fleury was giving up
6
goals.
You got Zachary Foucault in Halifax. Kale, I should say. Zucale.
Yeah, but he's not a top 5 pick.
No, he's not. Goalies don't go high.
No. And when they do, well. Anyway.
Okay.
So looking
Tuesday.
All right.
The competition committee, the NHL's competition committee will meet.
That was an interesting segue. I had no idea where you were going Tuesday. But we were going to the same spot.
The NHLPA named their 5 representatives. You have David Backus from St. Louis, Corey Schneider from Vancouver.
Roberto Luongo? Oh, no.
Oh, look, he's the number 1 goalie there.
It would be great if Luongo was on this, too.
Michael Camorelli from Calgary, Ron Hainsey from Winnipeg, and Alex blah, blah, blah from St. Louis Blues.
Peter Angelo. How dare you? Some good players. Why does St. Louis get 2 players?
And Matthew Schneider, the NHLPA's special assistant to the executive director, nice title, is chairing the meeting.
Can you imagine what his resume looks like? He's got to put that on there, and he's got to list all 27 NHL teams he played for, too.
On the NHL side, there's going to be Ed Snyder, Stevie Yzerman, David Pohl, Ken Holland, some bigwigs there, and Randy Carlyle. So that's a pretty good group. Now, what are they going to do? What are they going to talk about?
Change Rule 63?
I hope. The GMs just had their meeting, so they brought up a few issues, and some of those issues will be discussed. The hybrid icing will be discussed. That falls under the competition committee. The grandfathering in mandatory visor use will be brought in.
Big issues this year.
Yeah, pretty big issues.
And the competition committee, usually if they talk on something and they want to get it implemented, it'll go into effect next year. I've made this reference before. It's not college football. We don't have to wait 35 years for this to happen. It will happen next year.
Right. So, they're going to be looking at a bunch of rule changes, equipment regulations. That was the other big one that caught my eye, is the GMs want to change the size of the goalie pads.
Oh, so they can't wear the sofa cushions on their shoulders?
Right. So that's another one. There's some pretty hefty topics here that these 10 people in a room with Schneider chairing it are going to be discussing.
We should get into that on one of these shows over the summer, the goalie equipment. That needs to be slimmed down to the point where it protects the goalie and nothing else. You can sit there and talk about how you want to. There's all the people out there who make the goal bigger, do this, do that to increase scoring. How about the goalie who weighs 190 pounds doesn't weigh 400 pounds when he steps on the ice? That's the most easy, basic way to fix that.
So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. Those are some, especially the hybrid icing. I don't know how you feel about that, but
I would be fine if they went to it, just because I've seen enough players get hurt chasing down. And here's the thing. That's a play where when you get hurt, you get really hurt when you're chasing it down.
Oh, absolutely. Especially, again, in the playoffs when things are intensified tenfold. Hybrid icing. Also, the hybrid icing would speed up the game.
Yeah.
We're not waiting around.
What was the argument against that? They don't want the players to just throw it down the ice and then not even chase after it because they know it's icing. Who cares?
That'll happen.
Yeah, but that's whatever. That's fine.
But that's okay. I know it's icing, but there's a penalty for the penalty for icing like that is that your guys have to stay on the ice.
Yeah, you
don't get to make
punished.
A line change. You are being punished. It really is not going to slow the game down that much. I don't think. I think
it might speed it up.
I don't see it as a problem.
There'll just be a lot of watching refs skate, which I'm all for that. That's it for episode 9. Next week, more on the playoffs as we close in on the Stanley Cup.
And hopefully, Luke, when we get together next week, we'll finally have some coaching questions answered.
All that plus whatever else comes up in the next few days. For Doug Cannon, I am Luke Lipinski. Thanks for listening to the Hockey Podcast.